So in order for us to have an FK-IK switch for these controls, we need to build the FK. So we've already got the IK, so we need to build out the FK controls. I'm going to do that with NURBS circles. Yay! Okay, cool. So we're not going to do that. I can go ahead and create one for the clavicle, but it's not going to matter in the current hierarchy of things. So let's go ahead and just create that for the clavicle. I'm going to hide the geometry, snap that to the NURBS circle, bring the geometry back, and I can rotate this out 90 degrees. And obviously that's kind of like intersecting with the body and stuff. I can go back and reshape this. Yeah. But not right now. I'm okay with that for now. I'm going to leave that as it is, duplicate it, and hide the geometry and snap it. Whoa, why is the snap not working all of a sudden? There it goes. Snap it to the shoulder, and then we can scale this sucker down. And we're going to continue these NURBS circles for the elbow and the wrist. So let's control D, hide geometry, snap to that elbow. I want to make sure it's snapping directly to that elbow joint, and then control D to snap to the wrist joint. There we go. And I can scale the wrist joint down a bit, probably the elbow as well. Yeah, I'll scale that one down a bit as well. Again, this is why we made that IK a star, because we can see the two differences between the two different controls. Select all of those controls that we just made, do our fun dance of freezing the transformations, deleting the history. And now the fun dance of naming these. So this is L underscore FK underscore clavicle underscore control. This is going to be L underscore FK underscore shoulder. I don't like capitalizing. That's just me, though. It's up to you to kind of like decide what your naming convention is, as long as you can understand what they are. L underscore FK underscore elbow underscore control. And L underscore FK underscore wrist control. Guess what? Offset groups. Let's group them to themselves. So G, control G to group it item to itself. Center that pivot. And rename that group underscore GRP. Underscore GRP. I didn't center that pivot. Let's go ahead and do that. Underscore GRP. Center that pivot. Shoulder is the last one I didn't finish. Oops. There we go. Underscore GRP and center that pivot. Cool. So we've got our FK controls. Now they just need to control the actual joints. Again, we'll circle back to the clavicle. Leave that sucker alone for now. We just got that joint created, or that control created, so leave that alone for now. And let's worry about everything else. So we could just go up here and say constrain. Where's that option? Here we go. Parent. And we could just leave it as it is. That being said, let's talk about FK. So IK, as you've seen, is being driven from the wrist, and thus the rotation of the shoulder and the elbow is being driven by where that control is going. This is inverse kinematics, meaning that the end of our joint chain is adjusting where everything else is going. Forward kinematics is we start from the beginning, and the rotations of the shoulder and elbow will determine where the wrists are going, and so forth. So that's what we're building up right now. That being said, we're not going to select these joints and translate them. We're not going to move them with the translates. We're just going to rotate. So for our control here, we're going to make sure to uncheck that translate for the parent constraint options. Again, I found this by going up here to constrain, parent option box, uncheck that translate option for our parent constraints that we're about to make. These are a little bit of inverse selections that we want to make. So we want to select the driver and then the driven. So the parent and then the child. And that's how we're going to apply these constraints to these specific joints. All right. Hit apply. Notice now the joint, if I select it, all of the rotates are being driven. They have a blue icon next to them. If I go over here to my shoulder, take a look at that. There's that parent constraint. Dope. Doing the same thing. I know I just minimized that, but I need that back. Come back. parent constraint. So doing the same thing here, elbow control to the elbow, and I'm making sure to select the control, then the joint, and hitting apply, making sure that translates turned off and rotates turned on. Typically we get an error at this point, and notice that it doesn't work, right? Nothing works because that IK control is in charge. We're going to disable it here in just a second. But now finally, we're going to do the wrist control to that wrist joint, not the IK handle. There we go. Wrist control to the wrist joint and apply. This one works because the IK handle only controls the position of that wrist joint. It does not control the rotation. So that's nice. But we're going to have to do some work to make sure that we can kind of switch back and forth between, because when you animate and when you go to use this rig, you're going to use one or the other. You're not going to use both FK and IK at the same time. You're going to use either forward kinematics or inverse kinematics. So we need to build controls that's going to allow us to make that switch. I'm done with my parent constraint menu, so I can close that out. And let's build us a hand control that's going to sit above the back of the palm, the back of your hand, right? And that's going to give us not only in the future our finger controls, but currently it's going to allow us to animate. Whoops. Go to your move tool, hold V, middle mouse click and drag to snap it there. But currently it's going to allow us to create that handle switch. So I'm just going to put this above the palm, and I can shape this however I would like. So I'm going to make it kind of flat towards this side. And actually, I'm okay with that shape. I think that shape's great for what I'm looking for here. Something simple. Don't have to be too complex with it. So you know the drill. After we make it, freeze those transforms, delete that history, give it a name. L underscore hand underscore control is what I'm going to call this. Even though we're not going to actually rotate this control, in fact, it's going to be rotated by the joints here. So we're going to actually parent this to that middle joint. But first, let's get that pivot point's fine being where it is. But I do want to give an offset group here just in case we ever need it. And then copy that name over and center the pivot of that offset group. Wonderful. Awesome. So I'm okay with that pivot point being right there. Again, because we're not going to select this and rotate it or anything. It's going to actually be driven by the wrist. So let's go ahead and get that selection set up. So parent, then child, and hit P. So now whenever the wrist rotates, whoops, oh, I did that backwards. So sorry. Select the child, take the child to the parent is this order of operations, then hit P. So now whenever this goes to rotate, that hand control moves with it. Cool. Oh, it looks like I did not delete the transforms, but again, that's fine because we're not moving this. In fact, I can hide these attributes. So I'm not going to translate, rotate, or scale this control. So I can highlight all of those, right click, and say hide selected. So we're never accidentally keying those. And now I want to add attributes to this. So channels, just like we've done before, add attribute. We get our nice attribute name here. We're going to give this FK underscore IK switch is what I'm going to call it. Minimum of 0 and maximum of, I'm going to put 1. You can do 10. But I find for FK-IK switch, since we're not animating a transition between 0 and 1, like we don't have to worry about the in-between because we're just turning it off or on. So I'm just going to put 0 and 1 for this one and say add. Whoa, so sorry, I knocked my desk. I could turn off my invisibility as well, or my visibility rather. Yeah, let's do that. Let's just hide that selection as well. So it's really, we select this control, all we get is that FK-IK switch. I might have locked and hid those because it's still possible to select this and move it around, but I think that's okay. Okay, so FK-IK switch, we need to connect this up to this IK. If I select this IK handle, not the IK control that we created, but this IK handle that is parented underneath that control, We go over here to our attribute editors. And I go down to, let's see, IK solver attributes. That's what I'm looking for. So go to your attribute editor, wrist IK handle, and go down to your IK solver attributes. And this is what we're going to turn off and on, is this IK blend. Because when it's turned off, our FK works. Kind of. We got a few more extra steps to kind of get that going there. Let me try that one more time. Interesting. The elbow is acting a little odd. We may circle back to that here shortly. But for now, again, the IK handle, what we need to do is use set-driven keys with this new control that I just created and this FK-IK switch to drive this IK blend attribute. So we're going to use our set-driven keys. So we're going to use our set-driven keys, like I just said. Sorry, I had to pause there for very briefly. So we're going to go up here to our animation channel and go to key and say set-driven key. Set. And it's going to pop open our set-driven key window. Whoops. I'm just going to open it up on my other monitor. Got to resize it and trick my monitors. And there we go. So what I want to do is load the driver and the driven. So I already had my IK handle selected when I opened the set driven key. So it's already opened up that IK handle. And if I scroll down, there's that IK blend that we're going to be driving. Now I just need to load the driver, which is going to be this hand control that we created. Load selected as driver. And then we can select that FK-IK switch. So let's just check it out. So it's currently set to 0. So when this is set to 0, FK should be enabled. And when this is set to 1, IK should be enabled. So let's just make sure when it's at 0, let's make sure that IK blend is also at 0. Wrist control. I can also probably select it over here if I go to the IK wrist handle on the driven and then IK blend. There we go. So we'll set that to 0 as well and say key. Now I'll go back to that IK hand, set this to 1, go back to that wrist, and set that IK blend to 1 and say key. So now I can close the set driver key window out. And if currently my IK handle, FK-IK switch is set to 1, so IK should be enabled. So if I select that and move it around, there we go. Now if I turn this switch off, that IK handle should be disabled. We can still move the control and that IK handle with it, but it's no longer controlling our rig. Now we do have to go through an extra few steps here to get set up for our elbow and shoulder to work properly, but that's kind of the next steps here. But again, that is setting up, turning this FK-IK switch on and off.